Today, I will be joined by our project partners, Viola Lutz, consultant with South Pole Group, working on topics relating to climate change and the financial sector, and Padraig Oliver, senior analyst in the Climate Policy Initiative Climate Finance Workstream, working on the interchange between government, the private sector, and capital markets in scaling up climate finance flows. Magnus Borelius, head of Treasury when the city of Gothenburg in 2013 became the first city in the world to issue a green bond, will also share with us his experience later in the presentation. But let's now start from the basics. What is a green bond, and how can cities use them to access finance for their infrastructure and climate needs? A bond is a form of debt. It can be issued by companies, governments, municipalities, banks. In the case of green city bonds, it is not just municipalities, but also public utilities and transport authorities, for example, that can issue bonds. Bonds are normally bought by institutional investors, such as pension funds and insurance companies, although municipal bonds can also attract retail investors, as is the case in the US, for example, where these securities are tax exempt. The key characteristic of a green bond is that the proceeds are used to finance assets and projects that are environmentally friendly. Green bonds normally include an external review to confirm their environmental credentials, and disclosure and reporting procedures are put in place to monitor the allocation of proceeds during the lifetime of the bond. This opens a wealth of opportunities, as up to $63 trillion is needed to finance the low-carbon transition. Green bonds can finance projects and assets that can help cities adapt to changing weather patterns and mitigate their carbon footprint. Access to capital for low carbon and climate resilient infrastructure is particularly critical for cities, as they account for 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions and increasingly face air and water quality issues, combined with increasing population levels. Green bonds do not only finance renewables energy projects, but also energy efficiency projects for residential and commercial buildings, low carbon transport such as metro, rail, and bus rapid transit, and also water infrastructure such as storm adaptation, as well as waste management and recycling. The green bond market has been growing exponentially over the past 4 years. Issuance in 2016 has quadrupled compared to 2015 and is expected to reach $80 billion by the end of the year. The municipal segment of the market has been a driver for growth, as you can see from the graph. The US market is the most developed, but other countries are following. In emerging markets, the City of Mexico has recently issued a 1 billion Mexican pesos, or USD 50 million, green bond, financing low-carbon transport, energy efficiency retrofit, and water infrastructure in the city. There are 5 easy steps to issue green city bonds. Firstly, the issuer, so the municipality or the public utility, for example, needs to identify green projects that are suitable for green bond financing. Then an independent review should be arranged to confirm the environmental credentials of the selection. This is important to attract investors who are looking to invest in environmentally friendly assets. It can be done in the form of a second-party opinion or certification, which we provide here at Climate Bonds. Next, tracking and reporting of the proceeds of the bond needs to be put in place. Finally, the green bond can be issued and the use of proceeds reported annually to ensure they're financing the project selected. Viola and Padraig will now take us through the Green Bond City Guidelines and Toolkit.
Thank you. We're going to focus on action now in terms of after the Paris Agreement, there's been a significant focus on action worldwide in terms of climate change implementation. And cities are at the forefront of that. We found there's about 271 cities now that have committed to developing climate change mitigation and adaptation plans through signing up to the Compact of Mayors. However, we found that 4% of these cities only have access to international capital markets, and 20% of them have access to domestic capital markets. And from our perspective, we knew that the green bond market has grown significantly in recent years, and cities must be wondering how can this new market help them to fund these long-term climate investment plans that they've committed to doing. And so that was our starting point in this analysis. We started with their city perspective about how this market can help them, and we started looking at the data. And this data, in terms of what has flowed to date, was analysis that we did over the summer when we had a total market size of all bonds issued since 2007 of 131 billion, but we know that that has since grown to over 170 billion, with a lot of issuance coming from developing countries specifically, particularly banks in China and India. But we believe that the proportional analysis of this still stands and even strengthens some of our recommendations towards the end of it for cities, how cities can help access the market. And the granular reporting that has now emerged in green bonds over the last 2 or 3 years, especially from development finance institutions, means that we can now look at a lot more what the flows that are linked to green bonds are going towards, the locations as well as the sectors. And that gives us more information about what benefits cities are getting out of the green bond market particularly. We found 29% of all flows have gone to developing countries. That is the 38 billion box there in the left tree map. And based on the available data we could get from development finance institutions in particular and other issuers, we found $2.3 billion or 1.7% of the overall market that flows to city-based projects. So those are projects in urban transit systems, municipal waste, district heating and clean water, etc. Now, when we were comparing these flows to how cities in the developed countries or in the north are benefiting from the green bond market, we found almost an inverse relationship in terms of who is the issuer of the bonds that they are providing the flow that is benefiting cities. So as you can imagine, in more developed capital markets, cities or city-based affiliated entities like authorities or utilities, in the US and Europe, they issue their own bonds, whereas in developing countries in the south, the flows are almost predominantly originating from development finance institutions. So there's a lot of potential just to improve the impact of reporting the co-benefits around sustainable urbanization that we believe the green bond market may be interested in, that cities can avail of. And this could help then broaden the options for cities in developing countries to align with proxy issuers, not just multilateral development banks, but also national development institutions in their country, or the domestic banks that are now very active in India and China in particular in issuing green bonds. So for a city, back to the city's perspective in particular, we see 3 key drivers where they would want to develop a green bond market strategy that most cities are undergoing at the moment. And the first key driver is around their efforts to improve their creditworthiness in general, whether that is to a long-term objective to issue bonds in the market, or whether it is to improve their sources of long-term private finance from banks and other institutions. But we believe that through developing a green bond strategy, they make efforts to increase transparency and also internal coordination and administrative coordination between different city departments that overall can help them in their creditworthiness improvement drive. The second key driver is around visibility around those investment and infrastructure investment plans that 271 cities have developed. If they are developing a long-term strategy for diversifying their sources of private climate finance from different investors and banks, whether it be accessing the bond market or not, developing a green bond strategy through themselves or through proxy issuers can help increase the visibility of those plans, make investors aware of their track record and their efforts to improve their creditworthiness as well. And for the investors, there is a significant co-benefit then in terms of achieving impacts and reporting on impacts in sustainable urbanization. So finally, we think that cities may therefore consider how a green bond market strategy may support their efforts to expand their sources of capital over the long term. And so any good green bond market strategy that is specific to the context of the city in question can align with these drivers. So how do cities therefore go about figuring out their own green bond market strategy? And here we have a decision tree, we hope, that can help cities no matter what their short-term context is in terms of whether they can issue bonds or not, whether they're creditworthy or not, or whether they have significant green infrastructure investment plans or not. We have developed this kind of decision tree, which follows sections also in our guideline to help cities go through that process about developing their strategy. We found that if cities in the long term can issue bonds, and if they do wish to issue green bonds, as the letter was suggesting, there are plenty of instructions in the market and assistance in the market available for them to do that. They can also potentially, if they are not creditworthy yet, they may explore options for credit enhancement. These include structuring, sourcing guarantees, but also they could also approach some development finance institutions to act as a cornerstone buyer to invest in their bonds that may attract other private investors into the deal as well, into the transaction. The third option there is if the city is also a debtor or is looking to set up a public-private partnership or an SPV with a project, specific infrastructure project in mind, they may explore a green bond issuance with the private sector to source that project and again gain visibility for their infrastructure investment plans. And then the last one is around exploring how to align and engage with other issuers that are active in the market now in order to get visibility around their infrastructure investment plans as well, and perhaps their own intentions to access the bond market over time. We found in our analysis that national entities have issued green bonds from 6 developing countries. One has been dollar denominated. So there are some already active green bond issuers in developing countries that may partner with cities or that cities may partner with. These include China, Costa Rica, South Africa, India, Turkey, and Mexico. And so with that, I will hand over now to Viola to discuss the toolkit to help cities go through that process.
Thank you very much, Fredrik. So I will be showing you more of the toolkit, where we have collected a number of resources for cities to access and interactive elements that help cities think through the process of how they can approach issuing a green bond. So the idea is that the toolkit is self-explanatory. Cities can go through it in their own version, in their own time. At this point, it is a draft version. We are still collecting feedback from cities, and we will welcome any municipal participants and other participants as well to contact us with any feedback after the webinar if of interest. And it helps cities, so we propose a number of steps, and it does help cities to follow those steps. And they are closely linked to the guidelines that Frederik has been mentioning. So let me briefly share my screen with you. So what you now see, and I hope everyone can actually see it, is the start page of the toolkit. So in this first step here, introduction, you can always see it here below, you receive an overview about the different steps that need to be taken in order to issue a green municipal bond. So we can see again very closely linked to the guidelines. It is about exploring a potential issuing strategy, defining selection criteria to identify green projects, thinking and potentially arranging an independent review, setting up the monitoring, reporting, and verification structure, issuing the bond, and of course, after the issuance of the bond, continue with monitoring and reporting. And what the toolkit now does is it links each of these steps that you can see on the left-hand side with resources in the various tabs of the toolkit. So as an example, you can see, and let me make this a little bit larger, you can see that the exploration of potential issuing options is linked to tab 0, the potential issuer tab. So let me show you, and this is the same for all the different steps. You can always see which tab name it links to. So let me, as an example, as an introduction into this tool, show you 2 of the tabs and how they function. If we start with the potential issuer tab, as Frederik has already outlined, the potential issuer tab is really the idea to help cities think around who a potential issuing entity can be for issuing a green bond. If we now go there, and again, I'll make it a bit larger. So how the tab starts, it always gives you an introduction to the topic, which shows you, which explains to you the logic of the tab and the next steps. For the potential issuing strategy tab, you see first a questionnaire with a number of very easy and simple questions, and they mirror the questions that you could also see in the decision tree that Frederik just presented and that are also in the guidelines. So this relates to the fact of whether or not a local a municipality can actually issue bonds from a regulatory point of view, and for example, whether or not a city has an investment grade credit rating. And these are really, you can see it very easy, yes and no answers that you can select from. These answers that the city enters here are then linked to an overview, and you can see this here, of potentially available issuing options. So you see in quite some detail, all the different options that the city has are mapped in this graph. We can see, for example, a city can issue its own city bond. It can issue its own city bond using credit enhancement, and there are various other issues, various other options, sorry for that. And you can see on the right-hand side that these different options give a city a different degree of visibility, depending on the shade of green that you see. So these are all the options, and then we can see if you, for example, then say, yes, I am a municipality and principally I can issue bonds, but no, I do not have an investment grade credit rating, so you answer no to question number 2. This is then mirrored in the graph, and we can see now the option of whether or not you can issue your own city bond is not displayed as a suitable option for you anymore. So based on this, you gain a very easy first overview about the possible strategies that are open to you. And if you then go further down, you have resources per issuing option. Say, for example, if you're issuing your own city bond is an option for you, then you see a description of what exactly that means. You see issuing examples, and from one of these issuers we will hear just after my presentation, we see description and further links. so that every municipal official can further dive into this topic and see what a concrete option actually means. So this is the potential issuer tab. Another tab that I want to briefly touch upon before handing over to Magnus is the potential green projects tab. So this is tab number 1, you can see it below here. The idea is to help someone thinking about a green bond to assess the potential of the green projects that can be financed with that. What does that mean? So we've built an overview based on kind of the minimum common denominator of what green means, and one can enter the number of projects and the volume of these projects into this tool. So how does that look like? We see here the potential green project input, and here on the left-hand side, based on the green bond principles, you see very broad project categories that are principally eligible for a green bond. In the next column, you see concrete project areas based on the Climate Bond Standard taxonomy that give you a more concrete idea of what type of projects you can include here. And then per year, you can enter the number of projects and the total volume of projects. And when you enter that in the end, and this is when we go up again, you receive an overview of the potential green projects. So the cumulative volume over the years, the total number of projects per year, again cumulative, and via the color code, you can see what project areas or what project categories your projects are in. So after filling this out, you have a good idea of the pipeline of green projects you have, whether they are operational or in construction phase. And they're just as a side note, a number of standards such as, for example, the Climate Bond standard require proceeds to be allocated towards projects within 24 months of issuance. However, the idea of this tool is to also give you a look into the future to see how your project pipeline will develop over the next couple of years so that the city can more easily plan ahead. And with this overview of 2 of the most essential tabs of the Green Project tool, I want to hand back over. And again, please, if you have any feedback, if you have any suggestions, feel free to contact us after this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Viola. We are now going to hear from Magnus Borelius, who was head of the Treasury when the city of Gothenburg in 2013 became the first city in the world to issue a green bond. Since then, the city has issued 3 more bonds and is becoming a frequent issuer in the green bond market. The city of Gothenburg's green bond projects promote the transition to a low carbon and climate resilient society. Over to you, Magnus.
So, hello, and first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to speak here about our City of Gothenburg's work with the green bonds. And 3 years ago, the role of the Treasury for City of Gothenburg changed. We changed the way we raise funds because we started to issue green bond. And the most important thing here, I think, is that the Treasury and the colleagues at the Sustainability Department started to work together. That has been one of the key factors to the success we have had so far. And City of Gothenburg as a municipality is a quite large company group in Sweden for being a municipality. We own our own amusement park. We own the largest port in Scandinavia. We have housing companies and so on. So we have a wide variety of businesses within the municipality. And we have a long history in the bond market. We have issued the first bond, I think, back in the 90s. We have 3.8 billion euro outstanding in bonds. And as you heard here, we have issued 4 green bonds so far. The first one in September 2013. So it's around 4 billion Swedish krona, 4 billion euros at the moment. So around 10% of our outstanding debt for the moment is financed by green bonds here. And on the first slide here, project categories, you see what kind of green bond eligible projects that we can finance when we have such a wide variety of businesses in the municipality. The proceeds from the green bonds are used to finance projects defined within the city's framework for green bonds. And eligible projects may include projects that target mitigation and adaptation, and we also have a maximum of 20% for what we call environment. And the framework established by the city constitutes the basis for the city's work with green bonds. And in 2015, the requirements for what kind of projects we can finance were specified even further. So this was done in order to assure that there are clear and concrete requirements placed upon the projects. So within the sectors include the table, you can see here it's sustainable transportation, it's biofuel, it's waste management, renewable energy, water management, energy efficiency, environmental, sustainable housing, and smart grids. So when we issue a green bond, the investors at that moment don't know exactly where the money is going, but they are fine with that the money ends up in some of these project categories. But when we come to the year end, the annual report, our investor letter, impact report, we specify project by project, so then they know exactly where the money is. But since we have such a wide variety, they are fine with this. And I think also it's important here that it's not the green bond that makes you green. You have to have a clear and very good sustainable work at the base. And all those project categories here are based on City of Gothenburg's environmental program. So that's where you start. You don't start with a green bond in that way. An example of projects that we have funded so far is we have electric cars, we have sustainable housing, we have water management, what we call a Department of Sustainable Waste and Water for ultrafilter. We also have small projects like tree planting, and that's where we can pool both big and small projects into one specific bonds at that one time. The next slide. Here, second opinion by Cicero. And to provide validity, we also decided to have a second opinion from Cicero in Oslo in Norway. The reason we get the question now why we have Cicero is that when we did it back in 2013, Cicero was the only one in the market that could provide us with this. And Cicero is the Center for Environmental Climate and Environmental Research. So you must have a strategy here for sustainability. And they provided us with a second opinion that they looked into the environmental policies that the city has, the eligible projects under the Green Bond framework, what kind of strengths we have in the city, the weaknesses, the pitfalls, and transparency and monitoring when we report and verification. And I think this is important with the second opinion here when we talk to the investors to really show that we are doing what we are saying that we're doing. We're not making things up in that way. We actually have solid ground to stand on here. So you can, all those documents that we have here, you can read that, download them from our web page, and you will see the address later here. The next slide, the selection process. It's in order to identify the green bond eligible projects in a rigorous review and approval process is in place to ensure that these projects are in line with the green bond framework that we have and targeting the mitigation and adaptation of the effects for climate change and other important environmental aspects here. So when we do this in the city, we have a working group with expertise on climate change. We have the environmental and financial markets, and financial instruments are involved in the selection process, ensuring that both green and secure investments for that way. So following dialogue with administration and municipality companies within the city, we talk to our companies, we talk to the city executive office, selection projects in accordance with the city's environmental and climate programs. So the environmental administration provides expertise and verifies the selection made by the city executive office. So the city executive office then presents the final selection to the city executive board. So it's a rigorous process that we have to make sure that there are the right projects here. We don't miss anything. In this cycle here is more or less what we are doing here at the Treasury Department. You have the project evaluation and selection. We have the management of the proceeds. We have special accounts holding proceeds from green bonds. We have the annual investor report showing the preliminary allocation to each project for the coming year. We have the impact measurement and reporting, extremely important with the transparency here, so you have the confidence from the investors, potential investors, and the financial market. And then we have the eligible criteria and use of proceeds. And this are constantly working to improve as well, to always make sure that we have the credibility in the market. The next slide here, the investor relation, is something that has changed for us since we started to work with the green bonds. We have a lot of investor relation activities for the ordinary bonds or the days prior to the green bonds. But when we started with that, we decided to be very transparent here, and so we have an added pages here that is just dedicated for the green bonds. And here you can find the green bond framework, you can find our projects, you can find our second opinion, and all our investor reporting as well. And these pages are the most clicked on our web for the moment. We see a growing interest for these pages as well, and they're constantly updated, so the investors know exactly where to find the information. And what we have heard so far, they are very pleased with this kind of process that we are providing them with the information as well. And here you can see where you can find all the information here. It's finance.gothenburg.se. If you have any questions on that, you're more than welcome to contact us. One thing that also has changed a lot for us is financing a sustainable future. This is two examples of what we call tombstones here in the financial world. And having a tombstone on a municipality AAA rated bond has never happened in our world before here. But when we started to add this environmental touch, the green bond to it, the investors started to get very interested to put their brand next to the city's brand to show that we are supporting this kind of environmental friendly development here. We want to show the rest of the world that we are engaged in these kinds of questions. And it's the first time actually that the investor decided to be public with their investments here. And what we didn't calculate it in the beginning is that we also have broadened our investor base. We have new investors that never before have bought the municipality bonds, and but they buy the green bond, and we see that as very good from the risk management overall in that way. And we also have received questions from citizens living in Gothenburg if they can buy these green bonds because they want to be part and support the city. Unfortunately, at the moment, we cannot sell to the retail sector, but there are at the moment asset managers that have green bond funds where we are a part of them. So you've also seen an interest from the citizen here, and actually the most long distance call we have had was a shop owner in South Africa that wanted to invest in the city of Gothenburg. Unfortunately, we had to give him the same answer that we can't sell to retail. And we also see that we have had an increased credibility and focus on the sustainability work here, since now we are willing to bring the money into it and be public about it, exactly where the money is going. And that is also that the Treasury Department and the Sustainability Department are working so close together. They realize where the money is coming from, and we also realize where the money is going within the city. We have increased the knowledge on how we operate and what we do. We also had an increased and improved contact with our investors. When they visit us, we set up in investor relation activities here. When we present the city's environmental program, we present the financial reports from the city, and we also visit the sites or the different kinds of investments, so they can talk to the project managers or whatever and have answers to their questions. So it's much more interactive way of talking to you investors in that way. We are just not presenting the facts and figures about the economy. They are also interested in the city's development here, and then we see that it's very, very positive. And it's also important, I think, when you see that the Treasury and sustainability are working a lot together, it's necessary for success. But it's also important to trust each other here and don't step into each other's area. I think that's one of the mistakes we did in the beginning. It was that we at the Treasury tried to do more work than we actually needed to do. We wanted to control the whole thing. But we realized very soon that all our colleagues working with these environmental questions, they have a lot of information. And if you start working, it's not the point that you at the Treasury should be experts in environmental questions or vice versa. You should be two different experts working together. And I think that was what was difficult for us in the beginning to realize that. What we did this spring here, in end of the spring, we presented our first impact report. And I think that is transparency is very, very important here. And this is the front page from our impact report. You can also find it on our webpage. And there are currently no established standards or models regarding to impact reporting or project finance with green bonds. So we are continuously working on developing and improving the method for reporting the climate and environmental impacts of all our projects financed with the green bonds to the investors. And we also try to actively contribute to harmonizing efforts regarding impact reporting of green bonds. One of the positive things here is you have to talk to a lot of different players in the financial market. You have to talk to issuers, other issuers, you have to talk to banks, intermediaries, and discuss what is a proper level of impact reporting. What do you want to know? How can you compare the bonds? And so we try to collaborate a lot with different kinds of actors here. And we think there is a continuous development. It goes very, very quick. So we are even this spring having taking some help from the university here in Gothenburg, who will look into these questions for 5 months actually, see how we can improve it here in Gothenburg, both the process, the impact report, and what other players have done and so on, so we can be even better when we present the next impact report. But so far we have received positive response on this impact report, and I think once again, the most important here is to be transparent and listen to the investors. What do they want to know? What is proper level here, and what can we do better next time? And we also decided here to let Moody's help us. They have what they call the Green Bond Assessment. And that was Moody's recently assigned the City of Gothenburg with the highest Green Bond Assessment, GB1, for the development of a formal and rigorous process to identify, consider, evaluate, and select eligible projects for funding through the issuance of green bonds. And we thought it were important just to have someone looking into our process. How do we do? What do we do? What can we do better? And the strengths that we received was transparent reporting, rigorous process to identify, consider, evaluate projects. And the weaknesses is that there, for the moment, no internal or external audit for the moment looking into it. So it's sort of always upfront in the process. There are a lot of good control and so on, but we for the moment missed the audit in here. But I think there will be in the coming years here that auditing firms also can contribute here to make the process even better. And the last picture here before we open up for questions and so on is that we are also see that we're extremely proud here to receive the United Nations Award Momentum for Change for our green bonds. And to be honored by that at the UN Climate Conference here, COP22. And Momentum for Change provides a public platform to highlight broad-ranging climate change actions that are already achieving real results on the ground. So the Lighthouse activities are showcased at the annual Nations Climate Change Conference back in November here. And what we see here, future for main issues going forward, is we see a rapidly increased interest for the green bonds. And when we issue the first bond, we saw an interest from the financial market. Some questions, why you're doing this? Is it a better price? Isn't there just more work for the same thing? You are a AAA rated municipality, you have no problem raising funds. And when we issued the second one, we saw that the interest started to come from the environmental organizations, the NGOs. Can we work together with you in finance, and how do we do it? Is this a good instrument to sort of more focus on the climate issues? And when we issue number 3 and number 4 last year and this year, we see that we have a more and more question of this is an instrument building the sustainable cities, where we see the urbanization and the cities are the hotspots. We more and more of the questions we receive is on these topics here. And what we will also see in the future here is that we see an increased demand on impact reporting, more or less green, more standardization. I think it's important not to move too fast if you're not in the market, so they won't be too tough to enter the green bond market, but it's important that you always try to do it better and more transparent. And from the city's point of view here, this has started out as a very small standalone project at the Treasury Department, and now we are starting to see it as a process in the city more or less for funding, and we are trying to increase the amount of green bonds for the city here, and try to share the knowledge as much as possible for anyone who wants to know what we are doing. And our intention is to come back to the market here. I think we are coming back to the market here late spring, as we always do, and try to increase the amount of green bonds for the city. So that was quite a short presentation of what we are doing so far in the city here. And if you have any questions or want to know more, you're always welcome to contact us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magnus. That was an excellent insight into your issuances. Just a reminder that you can ask a question by using the Q&A box in the bottom right-hand corner. We've already had a couple come through. Let's start with one for Magnus. Are there plans for allowing retail investment in the future? What are the barriers to allowing this kind of buy-in by residents of Gothenburg?
Excuse me, I didn't hear the first line here. You repeat that, please?
Are there plans for allowing retail investment in the future for the green bonds in your future issuances? What are the barriers for that happening?
Yep. We are not allowed to sell to retail businesses in that way due to one citizen, unless you are extremely fortunate, because we are selling to institutional customers. But there are asset managers like SPP. I don't know if you heard of them. They are pension asset managers that have green bond funds, and they are buying our green bonds. I think the city of Gothenburg is one of the largest assets in that right now, and that you can buy as a citizen or yeah. So no, we are not going to sell to citizens at the moment. We are not allowed to.
Okay, thank you, Magnus. Next question. What are the benefits of green bonds for municipal issuers? I think Magnus covered this a little bit in his presentation, but Padre, do you want to give a more a global perspective on benefits for municipal issuers and issuing green bonds?
Yes, so if a city in I guess in the developed world or in the developing world is able to issue bonds or regulatory allowed and they have creditworthiness, then the benefits are to get visibility around their investment plans, and also to, as Magnus was implicating there, get a more diverse investor base or a more interested investor base from environmentally mindful or socially impactful investors. And cities in particular is a theme or a narrative that is particularly relevant even in the green space, because there are significant co-benefits around health and air pollution and everything else that are included there that these investors may be inclined to report on.
Thank you very much, Padre. Next question. What was the process you went through in developing the toolkit? Viola, I wondered whether you could answer that for us.
Yes, happy to. So first we draw up a draft. So we had a number of expert interviews with investors, with cities. Actually, the city of Gothenburg was one of them, where we got a first feeling of the type of information that might be needed that are provided by past issuers. what experiences of past issuers are, and what expectations of investors are, for example. So based on this knowledge collection, we created a first draft of the toolkit. And for example, in a roundtable in Brussels with a number of European cities, we've done a first collection of feedback on the toolkit and adapted it accordingly. We're doing a second round of in-depth feedback of a roundtable in Mumbai in India next week. So it's quite an iterative process, and it keeps evolving the tool. But this is kind of in this close dialogue with investors and cities alike. We have drafted the current version.
Thank you very much, Viola. Next question. Can you explain the difference between second opinions and certification? Beth, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. So as we mentioned, when cities go to issue a green bond, as Magnus also mentioned, it's quite important to have an external review which confirms the environmental credentials of the bond. This is important for investors that are looking for environmentally friendly investments. There can be various forms of this. So as we said, second opinions are normally environmental consultancies that develop together with the issuer a green bond framework, and they assess their portfolio against this framework. What we do here at Climate Bonds is try to provide a simpler way to do this. So we manage here a number of technical working groups that are focusing on the different sectors, so from renewable energy to low carbon transport, sustainable land use, water management, etc. And they develop sector-specific criteria that align with the 2-degree world. What happens then is that, so this is an existing and external standard. When the issuer comes to market with a green bond, rather than working together with a consultancy to understand, what assets could qualify, he can just refer directly to the standard. And by providing the right documentation, we then review the portfolio against the standard, and we certify the bond against the standard. This is kind of a fair trademark stamp that is easily recognizable for investors, and should also in some ways support the issuers that come to market for the first time by providing them with already a firm guidance on which assets to include.
Thank you very much, Diletta. A question here from a sustainability expert from Cascais City in Portugal. They're asking, is there any training or support besides the toolkit in the short term for cities? If there are cities listening to this roundtable, what can they do to get a bit more in-depth support for issuing green bonds? Viola, is that something you could talk to?
Yes, of course, happy to. So we have, as a parallel to the toolkit, we have developed a training session around green bonds. So there is a concept available for an in-depth training around the topic that helps you to have kind of all the information for the toolkit to use it. If you're interested in more information here and getting to know kind of these training opportunities in depth, you're very welcome to contact us. And we can bilaterally give you deeper insights. There will also very shortly be available more detailed overview over the tool as a download from our respective websites.
Thank you very much, Viola. Another one here for Magnus. What level of detail is currently included in your impact reporting? Can you speak about that process? Is the plan to increase this over time? What's the main kind of narrative in your impact reporting process?
I think it will be increased over time, but I think it's also important to find some sort of standards here. And since we have such very, very different kind of projects like district heating, sustainable housing, electric cars, it's easy to find something that we can commonly measure on. So I think it's important to don't make it too much in detail, but since it's always one of the lessons we learned here is that we from the finance would like to write more here to do the report. Well, quite often the investors don't want to know more in the impact report, but they want to know that there are more figures, that there are more following up or risk management. But this is very, very often done by your colleagues at the sustainability department, because they are following up on their investments like we are in the finance or following up on our risk management. So it's already done. But I don't think the impact report will be too much detail in. But I think the investors want to be sure of that you can provide them with more information if they want to look into a project. I think it's also important that the impact report is one of the things that investors might be comparing when the green bond market is growing. And if you want to choose between two green bonds, for instance, you might look at the impact report and see what it says, and then it's important not to have it too much detail into that. Because I think the impact reporting is important from a transparency point of view as well, that but you don't have to present everything you have in it.
Thank you, Magnus. That's a really good point to make. Just time for one final question then. Are the eligibility criteria for bonds to be considered as green bonds the same worldwide, or do they change depending on the country, for example, developed versus developing countries? One that I might send Padraig's way. Can you speak to that, Padraig? Yeah,
absolutely. One thing I didn't mention earlier, we've kind of split the guidance for cities in developing countries into two parts, and one is around, how do they access the actual flows, whether it's through their own issuance or through another issuer that they can partner with or align with, and that's what is shown in the decision tree. Then the second part of the guidance is around exactly that then. What is the green performance metrics? What are the market norms that they have to follow in order to participate in the market, align with best practice as much as possible. We found that there's only one country so far that has developed specific national guidelines, and that's China. We do understand that India is in the process of developing them. They have developed guidelines for how to issue a green bond. So they have developed aspects about what an issuer has to do in the step-by-step process, but they haven't developed any thresholds on environmental criteria or green definitions as has happened in China. But beyond that, we found that there is a lot of disparity or diversity in the market between the options, such as using a second opinion provider, or if not a second opinion provider, using a rating tool from the rating agencies, or using a certification scheme such as the Climate Bond Standard. And so in different types of projects, there's a helpful table in the guide where we try to go through different sectors and try to bring out some examples from the market, especially in relation to city-type projects in transport and water and waste, etc. What are the different metrics or different thresholds that are applied by different types of issuers in those markets? So it is very much kind of context specific. It's about what is most useful for the city, what is the available services to them in the country, and also there's some trade-offs to be made in terms of time and cost as well, in terms of which way they want to go about what makes a green bond. But in general, there's a lot of options out there for getting at least an independent review from second opinion provider or another provider, such as a certification scheme in the market.
Thank you very much, Padraig. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for on this session. We are running a Spanish language Green Bonds for Cities Roundtable in 3 hours' time. Details how to register for this can be found on the Climate Bonds blog. I'd like to thank our presenters today, Diletta, Padraig, Viola, Magnus, for their informative presentation and for your insightful questions as attendees. Thanks for tuning in, and have a good day.